Right, so we're going to start taking the carbs apart. Ordinarily I would remove the manifolds, which would be a 1/2 inch AF spanner, but I'm only going to clean the carbs, so there's no need to do that. Also, we can remove the sort of spigots on the back. These go into the air filter, and you can put velocity stacks, bell mouths on or whatever, if you wish. In our case, it's just it's these rings which mate with the air filter, because we've got and they sit on the rubbers between the carb and the air filter. Right. Okay, so I think the first thing we'll do is we'll remove the float chamber. So that's just 2 screws. I'll be interested to see what's in these carbs actually, because they have been standing for 10 years. Now, from what I can see, amazingly the petrol taps have not been leaking on the tank. When I say leaking, often the taps leak through. They don't leak outside, but they leak petrol into the carbs, and so that would mean that the carbs would be full of horrible old petrol. But the petrol taps are amazingly good seal, and so I don't think petrol's been leaking in. So I think that a lot of the petrol that was in there would have evaporated long ago. So maybe there's nothing in here. Let's have a look. Just break the seal on the. Come on, I'm just trying to break the seal on the gasket. There we go. Because again, being there a long time, then we're going to see if we can get rid of the gasket. It's in our way a bit without damaging it, because we can just reuse that gasket. Come on, that's it. It's just stuck a bit around the screw holes. We may have to replace the gaskets if necessary. Right, and then we have the floats. Okay, so the floats sit in here. Can we see that? Yeah. And that's the float needle. We'll cover those in a minute. I'm just going to pull the whole assembly out. The float needle is going to come off, and the little hinge is going to come out. Well, one way or the other, don't want to come out, so that's fine. I'll leave it in if it don't want to come out. Oh, they've made it with a little, so it can't come out, which is good, because they're all, I don't know if you can see that, but these sort of hinge pins, they're always falling out, but these can't fall out, so that's good. These, I think, are the older. This is the float, and these are the older style floats. The newer ones are called sort of leak proof, or whatever they're called, stay up floats. These are hollow, so if they're punctured, unlikely, but if they are punctured, then they'll sink and they won't float. Whereas the stay up floats are basically solid, like they're like foam. So doesn't matter if they're punctured, then they'll stay up. Apparently they were developed for the military, who wanted floats that could take a small piece of shrapnel or whatever through them and still stay up. The old these are fine. The old floats, the old metal floats back in the day, they used to leak, and so you'd quite often find these floats full of petrol, and that's why they wouldn't work. These ones, unless you put a bullet through them, they generally don't leak. But then the modern ones are impossible to leak because they're not hollow. But these are 10, 12 years old, so they're not quite the new ones. And then inside, you can see that. Hold on. Let's have a look, see if we can see that. Yeah, so there, that brass at the bottom that's the sort of drain plug or sump, and I was expecting to find that full of gunge and so on, but of course these are squeaky clean. So I've been expecting these carbs to be very full of gunge, being 10 years old and having sat. But I think, as I say, I think the petrol that was in there evaporated, and because the petrol taps have been are very good at sealing, which is amazing in my experience, then there's no gunge. You know, if the petrol taps have been dripping petrol in over 10 years, that would be horrible jelly in there, but there isn't, so that's great. Okay, so that's the float, and this is the float pin. The idea is that when the float rises, I'll turn the torch off now, can't I? As the float rises, it causes the pin to go down and seal and stop any more fuel coming in. Get on there. Get on there. God. There we go. Oh, still not right. Right, I'll start again. So number one, these are neoprene tipped, these newer ones. They're the black rubber neoprene, so they seal that much better. I again, back in the day, they used to not seal, and that would cause that horrible flooding carburetor. So you'd be sitting there, you look down, and there's petrol pouring out your carburetor or whatever, and that was often because the float needle wasn't seating properly. So the idea is when the float goes up, it pushes the needle down, the petrol comes in there, and so when that's down, it seals, it can't come in. But if it's not sealing properly or whatever, then it keeps coming in and overflows the carb, because obviously the carb is below the petrol tank, so it just keeps flowing in. But with these neoprene tipped needles, there's much less chance. I did actually once have one that leaked, but much less chance of them leaking. Okay, so then what we got? So then we've got the main, oh dear, just looking at things, yeah. So yeah, so that's the tickle pin, and all the tickle pin does is literally push down on the float and hold it down, so it lifts the needle up, and so petrol comes in. Okay, that's and as I say, you can just change if you've just got the little tiny stubs, and you can change up to these extended tickle pins, which is so much better. Of course, unfortunately, you do still have to tickle on amyl carbs, but it's a sort of rite of passage kind of thing, really. You know, I love them, but you know, but typically you do have to tickle them. Right, then we've got the main jet. I'm going to I'll just take the jet out. Have I got the right spanner? Have I got the right spanner out? Okay, I'm going to take off the main jet, which is a Whitworth spanner, which I don't actually have. So that particular size. So I'm using a 5/16 AF, which fits well enough. Let's see. That normally, there we go. No, it has decided to undo the whole assembly, so that's fine. Okay, so this is the main jet, and this is the needle jet. So main jet, yeah, 220. It's a 220 main jet and a 106 needle jet. So these jets can be changed if you know what you're doing. But yeah, you know, I would never mess about with carbs unless you really know what you're doing, because you can get so lost with them. The main thing we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that they're clear, and they look clear. But these will unscrew from the main body here, either end, and then you can change them. Reasons for changing, maybe if you're running like without air filters. I have bell mouths on mine, so you might fit bigger main jets. I haven't on mine, and they run fine. Okay, right, so I hope you can see this. I think it's a sort of probably a good time to mention it. So this is from AMAL, the different parts of the carb and what speeds are affected. So up to a quarter throttle, it's all on the pilot jet. Okay, and how big the pilot jet is, that's the engine, that's how the engine runs on the pilot jet. Then the size of the throttle cutaway, the throttle slide, that affects from what's that, an eighth to a quarter open, the slide of the cutaway on the throttle slide. Then from a quarter to 3/4 throttle, the needle position, and also the needle jet will affect the running, and then from 3/4 to full throttle, the size of the main jet will affect the running. Okay, so you do need, you do need to understand these. Okay, because people say, "Oh, I'll change the main jet or whatever." Well, it's not ticking over right, They change the main jets. Not going to have any effect at all. Main jet is for full throttle only. Okay, now you've got a problem with tick over, then it's the pilot circuit really you're looking at, or the wear in the carbs, or block pilot jet, or worn carbs, or wrong size pilot jet, or not properly adjusted air screw. All right, but it's important to remember those stages. Right, we're going to be cleaning that out. I'm going to remove the sort of tick over screw. Can we see this? Yes, we think we can. Which has a little seal on it to stop air getting through. So you can use that to adjust the tick over, and to some extent the balance of the carb, but it's really more the tick over. And then we've got the air screw. I'm just going to screw it in to see what position it's in. It should be about 1.5 turns out. Half, 1, 1.5, and yeah, that's fully in. So it is just about already on it is already on standard setting, which is roughly where it should be, obviously. Right, we'll remove this now, this air screw. And as I say, this screw controls how much air goes through the carburetor on tick over in the pilot circuit. Okay, and we take that out. Yeah, it's just all, there's no real gunge in there, but it's all just all a bit dirty. I don't know if you can see that white bloom. It just needs cleaning. And then we won't be able to see it, but deep down in there is the actual pilot jet, which is very, very fine hole. So it's very hard to clean out. I'm just having a look myself. Can't really see anything down there. I think it's okay. So those are the main parts of our carb. That's really it. What we're looking for when we're taking the carb apart is wear in the throttle valve. Does the throttle valve slap about in here? Okay, that's number one. And number two is the blockage of the pilot jet. And then number three, cleaning out the jets, and are they the right jets? Is the float working properly? Is the needle sealing properly? That's really what we're looking for. Right, but our first and main job is to clear out the carb. Now I probably need a torch again, and we're going to try and clear out the pilot jet. And we have these air intakes here. I'm never quite sure where they go. They go through these drillings in the carburetor body, but one of those is for the pilot jet as well. Then see if I can, where I need a torch, see if I can show you this. See if I can get the torch in the right place. It's not covering right. There we go. Now I'll put my finger. Put my finger in now. Can you see those two holes there? Can we see those? By my fingernail there. See these two little holes in the bottom of the sort of venturi? There's a tiny little one just by my fingertip. I think we can see them. And then there's a slightly bigger one, like in where the throttle valve goes. Those two little holes. Now they're part of the pilot circuit. Now you see what I mean about them blocking up. But if they block up, it won't. The car won't work. Well, it certainly won't tick over. So we have to make sure they're clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my carb cleaner, which is foul smelling. I'll be putting the fan on in a minute because it really does. Should be using it outside really, but I'm going to use it here. I'm going to try and remember which holder is what. Right, that's coming out of the pilot. It's coming out here, I don't know if you can see it, out of this hole. Okay, so that's good. Oh dear. No, that stuff's getting to me already. Woohoo! Right, now where I want to be. There. Yeah, it's a bit stinky that. Yeah, good. So you might not be able to see this, But what I'm doing now is I'm squirting it down here, and it is indeed coming out of those two little holes, which I know you can't see. I'll put the light on the camera, see if that's any better. Whew. Wow, it's sure smelling. Right, so I'm going to put that up there, and I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there should be, and you can see the stuff coming out of those holes. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. Can't see it at all at the moment. There we go. And if that's coming over on the camera. I'm certainly spraying the camera. Yeah, so that means I know that those holes are clear, which I wasn't really expecting, because that's for the main jet, because they've been standing for so long with stale petrol. But I think the reason they're clear is, like I say, the petrol evaporated, no more petrol came in, and so they just sat there with it. So without, they were okay. I'm just going to clean everything now, because it just needs a good clean, these carbs. Obviously they've just been standing for a long time, but there's nothing wrong with them, as you'd expect, because they're brand new carbs. Woo! Woohoo! Apart from the smell of this carb cleaner, probably sending me to my grave a good few months before I would have done. Just give everything a good clean out, and we'll clean the main jet. You can see that that's all clean. The needle jet, we know the pilot circuit's clear, so that's good. So it's a pretty simple thing. You just got to keep it clean and make sure it's not worn, and don't mess about with all the jets and that unless you know what you're doing. Right, I'll do that back up. I think I do have the right spanner for the centre. Do I? I'm not sure I do. Ah, there it is. Oh, no, it's not. I thought that was a quarter width. Oh, no, it's not. It is a quarter width. I'm confused now. Yeah, there's no need to over tighten those. There we go. Now we'll put the needle jet back in. That's the one with the point on it. Pop that back in and do it back up. I'm just going to undo this now, not over tighten it, but 1.5 turns. Half, 1, 1.5, and then I'll be resetting these later. The aim of Premier carbs, and they have this drilled out and the hole there, and you can take out and change the pilot jet. The thing to remember is that these Norton Commando and the carbs sit side by side on the bike, so there's no way you can get to those screws and taking them out without taking the carbs off. So it's good that you can replace the pilot jets, but be aware you still got to take the carbs off in order to do so. Right, that one I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it fully unscrewed. Now make sure it's fully unscrewed so it's not it's not lifting the carb throttle at all. There's absolutely nothing in the bottom of this at all, which is amazing. Normally this the sump is full of gunge, and then you unscrew it here and just clean it out, but it's so clear I'm not even going to bother doing that. Then we'll put the float needle on, just slide it on there. Oh yeah, float heights. Yeah, we're going to talk about float heights, weren't we? Right, okay. Then just drop it in there, make sure it doesn't come off the float. And this one actually sort of, clips in. That's good. And now float heights. Now, these are slightly older carbs. The more modern carbs, this tang here is metal. The tang that sits on the float needle. And so if you want to adjust the float height, you quite simply just bend those tangs to whatever position you want. I'm not a big one for adjusting float heights. People go, I think the float heights are wrong. No. If you think about it, you're going uphill, downhill, accelerating, braking. The fuel in this chamber is sloshing about all over the place. And the fuel is picked up by the main jet here. So, it's already well immersed in petrol. The ideal float height should be that when the needle shuts, just when it's a couple of millimeters below the level, the float should be a couple of mil below the level of the top of the float. Okay, so don't push on the needle, but push on the tang. They're probably a bit high. I don't know if you can see that, but the needle isn't really quite shutting until the float is about level. So the float wants to be lower, but these are an older float, and they haven't got metal tangs, so you can't bend them. So there we go. So the float height is preset, and that's the way it's going to stay. And as I say, I'm not one who's totally hung up on float height, so it should be okay. I did once overdo it and bend them, and then basically the float hits the top of the carb before it seals, and so again you get that terrible terrible flooding of the carburetor because the needle's not going down. But I can't adjust that because it's an older float, so that's the way it's staying. Carb gasket, let's see if we get that on the right way. Yeah, I think we're just about okay. It's an old gasket, but it should be fine. And then try and make sure we actually get this the right way round on the carburetor. Make sure everything is still seated, that it hasn't come unseated, because those floats can easily pop out of position. There we go. Pop the screws back in. There, that side of things is sorted. What we'll do now is we're going to go and have a look at the throttle slides. Yeah.